The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sterile glow across the nearly empty office floor. Jake Morrison stretched his arms above his head, feeling the familiar ache between his shoulder blades that came from hunching over a computer screen for too long. The digital clock on his monitor read 8:47 p.m. later than he'd intended to stay. But the quarterly analytics report had demanded his full attention. He saved his work and began gathering his things, laptop sliding into its worn messenger bag. Alongside a half-empty coffee cup and the remnants of a vending machine dinner, the office felt different at this hour, stripped of its daytime energy and corporate buzz. Even the motivational posters on the walls seemed to sag with exhaustion. As he stood to leave, a soft glow caught his peripheral vision. 3 cubicles down, Alina Vasquez sat, illuminated by her monitor's blue light, her fingers flying across the keyboard with an intensity that suggested urgency rather than choice. Her usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of the long day. A few strands of dark hair had escaped her professional updo, and she'd rolled up the sleeves of her crisp white blouse. Jake hesitated. In the 6 months since he'd started at Morrison and Associates, no relation. Despite the coincidental surname that had sparked countless jokes during his interview, he'd observed Alina from a respectful distance. In client meetings, decisive in strategy sessions, and possessed of the kind of professional presence that could command a room's attention with a single raised eyebrow. At 34, she was the youngest senior associate in the firm's history, a fact that hadn't gone unnoticed by either admirers or detractors. Their interactions had been limited to the professional necessities, project updates, brief exchanges. In the break room, the occasional nod of acknowledgement in the elevator. Alina moved in the firm's upper echelons while Jake inhabited the more modest realm of junior analysts. Content to prove himself through solid work rather than office politics. But something about her posture tonight, the slight slump of her shoulders, the way she rubbed her temples between bursts of typings, suggested this wasn't just another late night at the office. Jake found himself walking toward her cubicle before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. "Alina?" His voice was soft, careful not to startle her. "Everything okay?" She looked up, and for a moment Jake saw something flicker across her face. Surprise or vulnerability quickly masked. Up close, he could see the faint circles under her eyes and the tension around her mouth that spoke of pressure and deadlines. "Jake," she managed to smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I didn't realize anyone else was still here, just finishing up the quarterly analysis." He gestured vaguely toward his desk. "But it looks like you're dealing with something more urgent." Lena's laugh held no humor. "The Henderson presentation. It's..." She waved a hand at her screen, where Jake could see what appeared to be a frozen PowerPoint slide. "The system crashed about an hour ago. I've tried everything I can think of, but it won't recover the file." "The Henderson meeting is Monday morning, right? 9 a.m. sharp?" Alina pushed back from her desk and ran both hands through her hair, finally dislodging what remained of her careful styling. 3 months of preparation for the biggest potential client we've had all year, and I'm looking at starting from scratch over the weekend. Jake knew about the Henderson account. Everyone at the firm did. Richardson Henderson's renewable energy company represented the kind of client that could define careers and the kind of loss that could end them. He also knew that Alina had been the driving force behind their bid, working nights and weekends, to craft a proposal that would set Morrison and Associates apart from the competition. "Can I take a look?" Lena's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know presentation software?" "I rebuilt my computer about 6 times in college," Jake said with a self-deprecating smile. "Turns out desperation makes you learn all kinds of things. No guarantees, but sometimes fresh eyes help." For a moment, Alina seemed to weigh his offer against her instinct for self-reliance. Jake could practically see the internal debate accepting. Help meant acknowledging vulnerability, but pride wouldn't recover her files. "I'd be grateful," she said finally, rolling her chair aside to give him access to her computer. Jake settled into the space she'd vacated, immediately aware of the subtle scent of her perfume and the lingering warmth from where she'd been sitting. He focused on the screen, running through diagnostic possibilities, while Alina pulled up a guest chair beside him. "Tell me what happened," he said, fingers already moving across the keyboard. I was adding final touches to the financial projections. The section when everything just froze. I tried waiting it out, thinking it was just processing, but after 10 minutes I had to force close the program. When I reopened it, the file was corrupted. Jake nodded, pulling up the file recovery options. Did you have autosave enabled? Thought so, but Elena's voice carried a note of self-recrimination. I should have been more careful. Should have backed everything up properly. Hey. Jake glanced at her, struck by the genuine distress in her voice. This wasn't the composed executive he'd observed in meetings. This was someone facing the potential collapse of something she'd worked toward for months. We've all been there. The number of times I've learned backup procedures the hard way would embarrass me if I had any dignity left. A ghost of a real smile crossed Elena's face. Somehow I doubt you lack dignity. Clearly you haven't seen me try to operate the coffee machine before my first cup of coffee. As Jake worked through the recovery process, a comfortable quiet settled between them. Elena watched his hands move across the keyboard with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for client presentations. There was something methodical about the way he approached the problem, breaking it down into manageable steps rather than letting frustration drive his actions. You know, she said after several minutes, I realized I don't know much about you beyond your excellent quarterly reports. Jake paused in his typing. Not much to know, really. Small-town kid trying to figure out the big city. You're much more. Interesting youngest senior associate in firm history, Harvard MBA, the Henderson coup. The Henderson coup, that's currently existing as corrupted data, Elena said dryly, which we're going to fix. Jake's fingers resumed their work. But seriously, don't sell yourself short. Everyone around here knows you're going places. Elena was quiet for a moment, and when Jake glanced at her, he found her studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you offer to help? I mean, really. It's Friday night. You were clearly ready to leave, and this isn't your responsibility. Jake's hands stilled on the keyboard. It was a fair question, and he found himself considering it seriously rather than deflecting with humor. Honestly, because you looked like you needed help, and I might actually be able to provide it. I know that's not very complicated, but... ... double quotes. He shrugged. Sometimes the simple answer is the right one. Most people would have just said goodnight and left. Most people aren't me. Something shifted in Elena's expression, a subtle softening. Around her eyes? No, they're not. The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that seemed to surprise them both. Jake became conscious of how close they were sitting, of the way the office's after-hours quiet created an intimacy. That didn't exist during business hours. Elena's eyes were darker than he'd realized. Flecks of gold that caught the monitor's glow. Elena broke the spell first, clearing her throat and redirecting her attention to the screen. So, what's the diagnosis? Jake blinked, refocusing. On the task at hand, good news and bad news. The bad news is the main file is pretty thoroughly corrupted. But the good news is, he navigated through several folder trees, his expression growing more optimistic. Your autosave function was working better than you thought. There are backup files here, and they're much more recent than you probably realize. How recent? Latest backup is from about 20 minutes before the crash. You might have lost a few small changes, but the bulk of your work should be intact. Elena leaned forward, and Jake caught his breath as her shoulder brushed against his. Can you recover? Let's find out. The next few minutes passed in concentrated effort, Jake coaxing files from their digital limbo, while Elena watched with barely contained hope. When the presentation finally materialized on screen intact, properly formatted and complete, Elena's sigh of relief was audible. Oh, thank God. She pressed a hand to her chest. Jake, I can't thank you enough. You've literally saved my weekend, possibly my career. I'm sure you would have figured it out, Jake said, though he felt a warm glow of satisfaction at her obvious relief. No, I wouldn't have. I was about to give up and start over. Elena turned to face him fully, her professional mask completely abandoned. This presentation means everything to me. The Henderson account could change my entire trajectory here, And she trailed off, perhaps realizing how much she was revealing. Jake saw the moment she began to reconstruct her professional boundaries, straightening her shoulders and smoothing her expression. "What I mean is," she continued in a more measured tone, "this is an important client, and I appreciate your technical assistance." But Jake had seen behind the curtain now, had glimpsed the person beneath the professional persona. Elena Vasquez wasn't just the intimidating executive he'd observed from afar. She was someone who cared deeply about her work, who felt the pressure of expectations and the weight of opportunity. She was human in ways he'd never allowed himself to consider. "Alina," he said gently, "you don't have to do that. Go back to being professional, I mean, not with me." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Jake thought she might respond with equal openness. Instead, she stood up, putting physical distance between them, as surely as she was rebuilding her emotional walls. "It's late," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You should get home. Thank you again for your help." Jake recognized the dismissal for what it was, but he found himself reluctant to accept it. Something had shifted between them in the past hour, some connection that felt too significant to simply file away under office interactions. "Alina, Jake." She turned back to him, and he saw a flicker of something warning in her expression. This was very kind of you. But we should probably maintain appropriate boundaries, for both our sakes." The message was clear, but Jake heard the uncertainty beneath it. Alina might be trying to rebuild her professional distance, but she'd felt the shift too. He was sure of it. "Of course," he said, standing and gathering his things. "Just, if you ever need tech support again, you know where to find me." It was a simple offer, but they both knew it meant more than that. "I'll remember that," Alina said softly, as Jake walked toward the elevator. He glanced back once to see Alina still standing by her cubicle, watching him leave. When their eyes met across the empty office, neither looked away immediately. It was only when the elevator doors closed between them that the connection was finally broken. On the ride down to the parking garage, Jake found himself replaying every moment of their interaction. The vulnerability in Alina's voice when she'd talked about the presentation, the way she'd studied him when she asked why he'd stayed to help, that charged moment when their eyes had locked and the rest of the world had seemed to fade away. Alina Vasquez was no longer just the accomplished senior associate he admired from a distance. She was a woman who worked too late and worried about failing, who could let her guard down with the right person at the right moment. She was someone who'd felt the same unexpected connection he had, even if she was fighting it. As Jake drove home through the quiet city streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The careful professional distance they'd maintained was compromised now, placed by something more complicated and infinitely more interesting. Monday morning would bring the Henderson presentation and a return to normal office dynamics. But Jake knew that neither of them would be able to pretend that nothing had happened in those quiet moments after hours. When the corporate masks had slipped and they'd seen each other clearly for the first time, the catalyst had been Elena's technical crisis. But what it had set in motion was something neither of them had anticipated. Something that would be much harder to resolve than a corrupted presentation file, something that was just beginning. The Henderson presentation had been a triumph. Elena's meticulous preparation, combined with the recovered slides Jake had helped salvage, had secured the account in a meeting that Richardson Henderson himself later described as the most compelling pitch we've seen in years. The victory should have returned things to normal between Alina and Jake. Should have closed the chapter that had opened during those quiet Friday night hours. Instead, it seemed to have opened a door that neither of them could quite bring themselves too close. It started innocuously enough. Alina began stopping by Jake's desk with what appeared to be legitimate requests. Could he help optimize the data visualization for the quarterly review? Did he have time to double-check her calculations on the Morrison Industries proposal? Each task was reasonable, well within the scope of his responsibilities, perfectly professional. But the conversations that accompanied these requests has begun to stretch beyond the necessary. Alina would linger, asking follow-up questions that didn't quite relate to the work at hand. Jake found himself volunteering information about his methodologies, his background, his thoughts on projects beyond his immediate purview. What had once been brief, functional exchanges were evolving into discussions that left them both reluctant to return to their separate corners of the office. "You have an interesting perspective on client psychology," Elena said one Wednesday afternoon. Perched on the edge of Jake's desk as they reviewed response rates for a marketing campaign, most analysts focus purely on the numbers. Jake looked up from his screen, where spreadsheets of demographic data painted their statistical story. Numbers tell you what happened. Understanding why requires looking at the people behind them. Is that something you learned in school? Life, mostly. Jake saved his work and gave her his full attention, something that had become natural over the past few weeks. "My mom always said you can't solve a problem until you understand what people actually need, not what they say they need." Elena's smile was thoughtful. Smart woman. What does she do? High school guidance counselor? 23 years of dealing with teenagers who insist they're fine while their worlds fall apart. Jake's voice carried obvious affection. "She has a gift for reading between the lines. Sounds like it runs in the family." The comment hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to address. Jake felt the familiar flutter of awareness that had become a constant undercurrent in their interactions, the sense that Elena was seeing him, really seeing him, in ways that went beyond professional competence. "Jake." Marcus Chen's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Elena straightened immediately, the casual intimacy of her posture shifting back to professional distance as their colleague approached with a stack of files. "Got a minute? I need to go over the Pemberton projections." "Of course," Jake replied, though he felt Elena's departure like a small loss. Elena Marcus nodded to her as she moved away from the desk. "Nice work on Henderson, by the way." Richardson was singing your praises at the partners meeting. "Team effort," Elena replied smoothly. But Jake caught the brief glance she sent in his direction before heading back toward her office. Marcus settled into the chair Elena had vacated, but his attention wasn't entirely on the files in his hands. "She's been spending a lot of time over here lately." Jake's fingers paused over his keyboard. "It's just collaborative stuff. Cross-departmental projects, right?" Marcus's tone was carefully neutral. Just seemed like an observation worth making. The implication was clear, even if unspoken. Jake felt heat creep up his neck as he focused determinedly on his screen. "What did you need on Pemberton?" But as they worked through the projections, Jake found his attention drifting to Elena's office, visible through the glass partition. She was on a call, animated and confident, every inch the successful executive. Yet he could still feel the ghosts of her presence beside his desk. The warmth that had radiated from her when she'd smiled at his comment about his mother. The realization that Marcus had noticed their interactions should have been a warning. Instead, it felt like a confirmation of something Jake had been trying not to name. Saturday morning found Jake at his usual coffee shop, a small independent place called Grind that served excellent espresso and maintained the kind of comfortable anonymity he preferred on weekends. He'd claimed his favorite corner table. Laptop open to a side project he'd been developing, a data analysis tool that could identify market trends in real dash time. He was deep in code when a familiar voice made him look up. "Jake, I thought that was you." Elena stood beside his table, dressed in jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger. More approachable than her office attire ever did. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she held a paperback novel alongside her coffee cup. "Elena, hi." Jake closed his laptop, suddenly self-conscious about his weekend appearance. Rumpled t-shirt and two-day stubble that spoke of lazy Saturday mornings. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I live just a few blocks away," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the residential area beyond the coffee shop's windows. "This is my Saturday morning ritual." She held up her book with a slightly embarrassed smile, caffeine, and escapism. "What are you reading?" Elena glanced at the cover as if she'd forgotten. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. "Love in the Time of Cholera. I'm working my way through classics I should have read years ago but never had time for."
Ow!
"Are you finding it?"
Oh.
"Devastating and beautiful," Elena replied without hesitation.
Oh.
as this idealized thing, but as something that can be patient and obsessive and transformative all at once. She paused, seeming to realize how passionate she sounded. Sorry, I get carried away talking about books. Don't apologize. It's nice to hear someone talk about something they love. The word love seemed to echo between them for a moment longer than necessary. Lena shifted her weight, and Jake realized she was still standing. Would you like to sit? He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Unless you prefer to read alone. I don't want to interrupt your ritual. Lena hesitated, and Jake could practically see her weighing the appropriateness of the situation. Saturday morning coffee with a colleague could be perfectly innocent. It could also be something more complicated. For a few minutes, she said finally, settling into the chair. What were you working on? Jake reopened his laptop, angling the screen so she could see the complex web of code and data visualizations. A pet project. Market analysis tool that can process real-time social media sentiment and correlate it with stock movements. Lena leaned forward, genuinely interested. That's incredibly sophisticated. This is what you do for fun? I like solving puzzles, Jake said with a self-deprecating shrug. Most people watch Netflix. I build algorithms. Most people don't have your brain. The compliment was casual, but it hit Jake with unexpected force. Alina wasn't just being polite, she was looking at his work with a kind of appreciation that came from understanding its complexity. What about you? He asked, deflecting attention from himself. Besides catching up on Garcia Marquez, what does Alina Vasquez do when she's not conquering the corporate world? Lena laughed, a sound more relaxed than any Jake had heard from. Her at the office. Conquering is a strong word. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping up. The Henderson presentation would suggest otherwise. The Henderson presentation was terrifying, Alina admitted. I spent 3 months preparing for that meeting, and even then I was sure I was going to fail somehow. Imposter syndrome is real, even when you've been doing this for years. Jake studied her face, seeing none of the polished confidence she wore so effortlessly at work. This Alaniance, self-aware, willing to admit vulnerability, was someone entirely different from the senior associate who commanded boardrooms. You know what I think? He said carefully. I think you're harder on yourself than anyone else would ever be. Maybe, Lena traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. It's just, when you're the youngest person at most tables, you feel like you have to prove yourself over and over again. Like any mistake will confirm what people already think, that you don't belong. Do you really believe people think that? Some do. Not everyone, but enough. Elena's smile was wry. The whispers when I got promoted to senior associate weren't exactly subtle. Comments about my appearance, speculation about who I must have. Impressed and how? Jake felt a flash of anger on her behalf. It's garbage. It's reality, especially for women in corporate environments. Elena shrugged, but Jake could see the old wounds beneath her matter-of-fact tone. You learn to work twice as hard and let your results speak for themselves. Is that why you work so late? Why you take on so much? Alina looked at him with surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to make the connection. Partly, also, because... She paused, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. Because work is reliable. It's measurable. You put in effort, you get results.
Art. Personal life is... messier?
There was something in her tone that suggested deeper stories, complications that went beyond professional challenges. Jake found himself wanting to ask, to understand what had shaped her cautious approach to trust and connection. Messier how? Lena was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. I was married for 3 years, divorced for 2. She met his eyes briefly, then looked away. Turned out I was much better at reading market trends than I was at reading people. The admission hung between them, intimate and fragile. Jake felt the weight of her trust in sharing something so personal, and the responsibility that came with it. I'm sorry, he said simply. That must have been difficult. It was my own fault, really. I threw myself into work, convinced myself that success would solve everything. Meanwhile, David felt like he was married to a stranger who happened to share his apartment. Elena's laugh held no humor. Ironic, considering work is where I've finally found someone easy to talk to. The words were out before she could stop them, and Jake saw the moment Elena realized what she'd said. Color rose in her cheeks as she backtracked quickly, in a professional context. Collaborative relationships are Elena. Dot 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 dot. It's okay. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Jake saw his own awareness reflected in her eyes. They were both feeling this pull, this connection that had started with a crashed presentation and grown into something neither had planned. I should go, Elena said, but she made no move to leave. Should you, Jake? His name was a warning, but it lacked conviction. I'm not asking for anything, Jake said quietly. I'm just ... I like talking to you too, more than I probably should. Elena closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, Jake saw a resignation and something that might have been relief. This is complicated, I know. I'm your senior. There are protocols, professional boundaries. I know that too. You're 25 years old with your whole life ahead of you. I'm 34, divorced, married to my career. Elena's voice carried a note of self-recrimination. You should be dating someone your own age, someone without all this baggage. Shouldn't I get to decide what I want? The question stopped Elena's litany of objections. She stared at him, and Jake saw the internal war playing out across her features. Professional caution battling against personal longing. What do you want? She asked finally. Jake knew the safe answer, the professional answer. He could diffuse the situation with humor, retreat behind appropriate boundaries, pretend this conversation had never happened. Instead, he chose honesty. I want to keep talking to you. I want to understand how your mind works. What makes you laugh? What you're afraid of? He paused, gathering courage. Want to know the person behind the senior associate mask. Elena's breath caught audibly. Jake, I'm not asking for promises or definitions, he continued. I'm just asking for honesty. Do you feel this too? The silence stretched between them, weighted with possibility and consequence. Finally, Elena nodded, almost imperceptibly. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. The late-night work session the following Thursday was Elena's idea, though she'd framed it as necessity rather than choice. The Morrison Industries proposal needed final review before Friday's submission deadline. Elena had specifically requested Jake's assistance with the data analysis section by 9 p.m. The office had emptied except for security and the cleaning crew. Elena had ordered Chinese takeout. They'd spread the proposal materials across the conference room table, working through each section with the kind of focused collaboration that had become natural between them. But as the evening progressed, their conversation had gradually shifted from professional to personal. Elena had mentioned her college years, leading to stories about professors and classmates that revealed more about her ambitions and insecurities. Jake had shared his own academic experiences. His decision to pursue analytics over law school, despite family expectations. Now, as midnight approached, they sat at one end of the long conference table, surrounded by the detritus of their work. Session-empty takeout containers, multiple drafts of financial projections, Elena's laptop displaying the final version of their proposal. I think we're done, Elena said, saving the document with obvious satisfaction. This is solid work, Jake, really solid. Make a good team, Jake replied, and immediately felt the weight of the words. They were discussing professional collaboration, but the subtext was unmistakable. Elena seemed... How so? People see the position, the salary, the accomplishments. They don't see the person. Elena's voice was quiet, reflective. After my divorce, I threw myself into work even more. Told myself that professional respect was enough, that I didn't need personal connections, but it wasn't enough. No, Elena looked at him directly. It wasn't. Jake felt the familiar electricity of their connection, stronger now in the intimate quiet of the empty office. What changed your mind? You did. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Jake felt his heart rate accelerate, aware that they were approaching territory from which there might be no return. "Alina, you have an old soul," she continued, as if she hadn't heard his attempt to interrupt. "From the first night, you helped me with the presentation. I could see it. The way you listen, really listen. The way you see things people clearly. You're wise in ways that have nothing to do with age." Jake felt the compliment settle into his chest, warm and affirming in ways he hadn't expected. "I'm not wise. I just ... I care about understanding things. People, especially." "That's exactly what I mean." Alina's smile was soft, almost tender. "Do you know how rare that is? How rare you are?" The words hit Jake with unexpected force. It spent years feeling ordinary, unremarkable, one face in the corporate crowd. But Alina saw something else, something valuable and unique. "You make it easy to be honest," he said. "It's easier than it should be." "What do you mean?" Jake hesitated, then decided to risk complete honesty. "I mean that talking to you feels more natural than breathing. I mean that I look forward to your visits to my desk more than anything else in my day. I mean that I've started staying late hoping you'll need help with something." Alina's eyes widened, and Jake saw his own feelings reflected their surprise, recognition, and something deeper that made his pulse quicken. "Jake, ... double quotes," she began, but her voice trailed off. "I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know all the reasons why this is a bad idea, but I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore. I can't pretend that you're just my colleague." Alina was quiet for a long moment, and Jake watched emotions play across her face like weather patterns: fear, longing, resignation, hope. "This could ruin everything," she said finally. "It could. My career, your career, our working relationship. I know. I'm not good at personal relationships, Jake. I have a track record of choosing work over people, of building walls instead of bridges. Maybe you just hadn't met the right person to build bridges with." Alina's breath caught, and Jake saw tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. "You don't know what you're saying?" "I know exactly what I'm saying." Jake reached across the small space between them, his fingers hovering just inches from her hand. "I'm saying that I care about you. More than I should. Probably more than is wise. But I care about you anyway." Alina stared at their hands, so close but not touching, and Jake could see her internal war playing out in real time. "If we cross this line," she said softly, "there's no going back. I know, people will talk. They'll assume things about how you got promoted, about favoritism and inappropriate relationships. Let them talk. It's not that simple, Jake. The corporate world doesn't forgive these kinds of complications. Then maybe the corporate world is wrong." Alina looked up at him then, and Jake saw the moment her resistance cracked. The careful control she maintained, the professional distance she'd worked so hard to preserve, all of it began to crumble under the weight of her feelings. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You won't. I don't want to hurt myself." Jake moved his hand the final few inches, covering her fingers with his own. Alina didn't pull away. "Then don't," he said simply. When Marcus mentioned Alina's changed demeanor the following week, Jake tried to keep his expression neutral. "She seems more relaxed lately," Marcus observed, settling into the chair beside Jake's desk with his morning coffee. "Less wound up about everything. That's good, right?" Jake replied, focusing intently on his computer screen. "Definitely. Was starting to worry people with the hours she was keeping." Marcus took a sip of coffee, his eyes thoughtful. "Though I have to say, ever since the Henderson win, she's been different. More, I don't know, present. Like she's actually enjoying the work instead of just grinding through it." Jake made a non-committal sound, hyper-aware of Elena's presence across the office. She was in a meeting with clients, visible through the conference. Rooms, glass walls, animated and confident as she presented quarterly projections. "You know what I think it is?" Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to Jake's discomfort. "I think she's finally found her rhythm here. Sometimes it takes a while. For people to feel like they belong, especially at her level." "Makes sense?" Jake managed. "Plus she's got a good support system now. You've been helping her with a lot of projects lately, haven't you?" The question was casual, but Jake caught the slight sharpening of Marcus's attention. Some collaborative stuff. Yeah, she speaks very highly of your work. Called you indispensable in the Henderson debrief. Jake felt heat creep up his neck. That's good to hear. Yep. Marcus stood, draining the last of his coffee. You might want to be careful, though. Careful about what? Marcus paused, and when he spoke, his tone was carefully neutral. Office dynamics can be tricky, especially when someone becomes the favorite. Other people notice patterns, you know. Warning was gentle but clear. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. After Marcus left, Jake found his attention drifting to the conference room where Elena was wrapping up her meeting. As if sensing his gaze, she glanced in his direction, and their eyes met through the glass partition. The smile she gave him was brief, professional, appropriate for the public setting. But Jake caught the warmth beneath it, the private acknowledgement. Of their connection that existed beyond office walls, Marcus was right, people were starting to notice. The question was whether Jake and Elena were prepared for the scrutiny that would inevitably follow. As Elena's meeting concluded and she began moving toward his desk, Jake felt the familiar flutter of anticipation that had become a constant in his life. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever professional risks they were taking, he couldn't bring himself to regret the path they were walking. Some bridges once built changed the landscape forever. And as Elena approached with a new project, that would undoubtedly require close collaboration. Jake realized he was ready for whatever that change might bring. The quarterly happy hour was already in full swing. When Jake arrived at the rooftop bar, the usual office hierarchies had been temporarily relaxed, partners mingling with associates, while servers circulated with overpriced appetizers. Jake spotted Elena, immediately elegant in a black cocktail dress, holding a martini with practiced ease while surrounded by colleagues. She looked stunning, sophisticated, completely at home in this world of corporate networking. Jake felt the familiar pang of awareness at the distance between them, not just physical space, but the professional gulf their recent intimacy had made him temporarily forget. Jake? Marcus appeared with a beer and glazed expression. Didn't think you'd make it. Thought I'd make an appearance, Jake replied, accepting a drink from a passing server. Elena knocked it out of the park with her Henderson presentation. Word is, she's being considered for partnership. Track could be the youngest partner in firm history. Jake felt pride he had no right to feel, along with the cruel timing of it all. Just as they were discovering their connection, circumstances were conspiring to make it more complicated. The evening passed in networking conversations Jake navigated on autopilot, gradually working his way around the rooftop while maintaining careful awareness of Elena's location. She moved between groups with graceful confidence, belonging here in ways that made Jake acutely aware of his outsider status. It was nearly 9 when their paths finally intersected near the bar. Elena was alone for the first time all evening, ordering what appeared to be her third martini. Taking a break from the networking circuit, Jake asked. Elena looked up, her face brightening. Jake, I was wondering if you'd show up. How's the victory lap going? Victory lap? She looked genuinely confused. Marcus mentioned Henderson went well. Congratulations on the partnership consideration. Elena's expression shifted to something like disappointment. News travels fast. Is that a problem? Sometimes I feel like my career is the only thing people see when they look at me, she said, accepting her fresh martini. Elena, the rising star. Elena, who might make partner before 35. Jake stepped closer, creating intimacy despite the crowded surroundings. What would you prefer them to see? Someone who has doubts and reads Garcia Marquez on Saturday mornings. For what it's worth, Jake said, that's exactly what I see when I look at you. Elena's breath caught, her grip tightening on her glass. Jake, ... Before she could continue, Richard Morrison appeared with booming bon ami. Elena, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Elena's professional mask slipped back into place. Richard led her away for introductions. She touched Jake's arm briefly, electric contact that lingered long after she'd disappeared into the networking crowd by 10:30. Jake found Elena sitting alone at a window table, staring out at city lights with melancholy expression. Her fourth martini sat mostly untouched, Mind if I join you? Alina looked up, blinking as if surfacing from deep thought. I thought you'd left already. You looked like you could use company. Perceptive as always. Her smile was rueful. Not exactly the graceful exit I planned. Jake studied her flushed cheeks and looser posture. Rough night? Successful night? Which somehow makes it worse. She gestured toward the party below. 3 hours of strategic conversations, career advancement opportunities, everything I should want. But I spent the entire evening performing instead of living. She picked up her martini without drinking. Do you know what the highlight was? Those 5 minutes talking to you by the bar? The only conversation where I felt like myself? Jake felt the weight of her confession. Alina, I know I shouldn't be saying this. There are boundaries and protocols and reasons why this is inappropriate. She finally sipped her martini, grimacing. But I'm tired of pretending our conversations are just professional courtesy. What are you saying? Alina met his eyes with devastating vulnerability. I'm saying I look forward to your visits more than any client meeting. I create projects requiring your input just to spend time with you. I think about our conversations. Long after they're over, the words hung between them like a bridge neither could cross without changing everything. Alina, you've been drinking not enough to use as an excuse. I'm saying this because it's true. Jake glanced around the bar, aware of their colleagues nearby. Maybe we shouldn't have this conversation here. Alina followed his gaze. You're right. I should go home. How'd you get here? Uber figured it was safer. I could drive you home. I only had 1 drink hours ago. Alina stared at him, weighing implications. Accepting meant time alone, away from office context. It meant acknowledging their relationship had evolved beyond professional collaboration. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. Jake's Honda Civic created immediate intimacy. Alina's BMW would never share a garage with. Her perfume filled the small space as Jake started the engine. Where am I going? Alina gave an address in an upscale neighborhood, settling back with a sigh of exhaustion. Long day. Long year. Sometimes I feel like I've been running a marathon. Without realizing it, as they drove through late-night traffic, soft music playing, Alina hummed unconsciously to an indie song. Can I ask you something? She said after comfortable silence. Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd made different choices? All the time? Why? The path I've taken seemed so clear when I was younger. Success was measurable. Alina stared out at passing streetlights. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I was living someone else's version of my life. What would your version look like? Alina was quiet so long, Jake thought. She wouldn't answer. I used to want to write. Stories, maybe novels. Impractical dreams of a naive 22-year-old. Why impractical? Because writing doesn't pay bills. Because I had loans and parents who'd sacrificed for my opportunities. Do you still write? Sometimes. Late at night, when I can't sleep, her voice carried wistfulness. Nothing serious. It's probably terrible. I'd love to read it sometime, Jake said without thinking. Alina turned with surprise that shifted to warmth. Would you really? From what I've seen of your presentations, you have a gift for language. The compliment affected Alina more than expected. You know, it's strange. I've received dozens of professional compliments, but hearing you say that about my writing matters more than it should. Why shouldn't it matter? Because you see me, not the position or achievements. You see me, and that's terrifying and wonderful and inappropriate all at the same time. They'd reached her neighborhood tree-lined streets with elegant condominiums. Jake drove slower than necessary, reluctant to end this honesty. Is that good or bad? I don't know. It feels dangerous. It's like you could destroy me if you wanted to. I would never, I know. That's what makes it dangerous. You're the first person I trust completely, and that scares me. Jake pulled into her condominium complex parking area, but neither moved to exit. I should go, Alina said without moving toward the door. Should you, Jake? If I ask you upstairs, we both know what that means. Do we? It means crossing a line we can't uncross, risking everything for something that might not work. We both go home and pretend this never happened? Alina closed her eyes. Then we go back to professional relationships and try to forget how it feels to be completely honest. What do you want, Alina? She looked at him with naked longing. I want to invite you upstairs for coffee, and I want us both to acknowledge that coffee is the last thing on either of our minds. Elena's condo was elegant yet personal books. Scattered on surfaces, a soft throw draped over the couch, signs of actual living beyond corporate success. Jake noticed a small desk where a laptop sat, surrounded by notebooks and printed manuscripts. Is that your writing? Elena paused in coffee preparation. Some of it. It's mostly exercises, character sketches. Would you mind if I looked? You really want to read my amateur scribblings? I want to understand you better. Elena studied his face, then nodded toward the desk. Fair warning, it's probably terrible. Jake read the first few pages of Liminal Spaces, immediately struck by Elena's elegant prose. The story followed a woman navigating career transition, caught between who she'd been and who she was becoming. The writing revealed emotional depths Jake had only glimpsed. This is incredible, he said. Elena appeared with coffee, expression anxious. You don't have to be polite, Elena. This is genuinely beautiful writing. You're wasting your talent in corporate law. Elena set down mugs with shaking hands. No one's ever said that about my writing. Have you shown it to anyone? Just my ex-husband. He said it was a nice hobby, but I shouldn't get distracted from my real career. He was wrong, was he? Look at my life's successful, financially secure partnership track. Are you happy? The question stopped Elena cold. I thought. I was. Until recently. What changed? Elena moved to the windows. Meeting you changed everything. How you made me remember what it feels like to have someone actually listen. You made me remember I used to want things beyond professional advancement. Jake moved closer. What did you used to want? Connection, understanding. Someone who could see past achievements to the person underneath. Elena turned, tears threatening. I used to believe in love, based on compatibility rather than convenience. Elena, I know this is crazy. You're 25, I'm 34. There's a power dynamic that makes this inappropriate. But I can't stop thinking about you. Jake felt the moment crystallizing. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you feel this connection too? Yes, God, yes. Relief flooded Elena's features, followed by fear. So what do? Jake moved closer until they stood feet apart. We're honest about what we want. What do you want? I want to know what it's like. To hold your hand without worrying who might see. I want conversations unbounded by office hours. I want to explore this feeling and see where it leads. I want that too, more than I should. They were close enough now that Jake could feel her warmth, see fine details usually hidden by professional distance. Elena, I need you to know I care. About you. Not just as a colleague or someone I'm attracted to, but as a person. Elena's breath caught. Why are you being so perfect about this? Because you deserve someone who sees your worth, who appreciates your mind and heart. Jake, her voice broke. I shouldn't be doing this with an employee. Jake stepped closer, close enough to see gold flecks in her eyes. Then stop, he said quietly. If you really want to. Elena stared at him, internal war playing across her. Features, professional caution battled personal longing. She stood at a precipice, and Jake's words made clear the choice was entirely hers. Then Elena stepped forward, closing the final inches between them. I don't want to stop, she whispered. I can't stop. And then she was kissing him. The kiss was tentative at first, almost questioning. But when Jake responded, framing her face with his hands, and kissing her back with all the longing that had been building for weeks, Elena melted against him with a sound of relief and surrender. When they broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his chest. What have we done? Something we both wanted. Elena looked up, eyes bright with tears. Everything's different now, I know. Are you okay with all the complications this brings? Jake looked at Elena, just the senior associate he'd admired, but the woman who read Garcia Marquez and wrote beautiful stories and trusted him with her vulnerabilities. I'm more than okay with it, he said firmly. Are you? I'm terrified. This could complicate everything. We'll figure it out. Be careful, discreet at work and in private. In private, we figure out what this is between us. Alina closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I haven't done this in a long time. Neither have I. But that doesn't mean we can't learn together. When Alina opened her eyes, Jake saw hope alongside the fear. You really want to try this, Lena? I've wanted this since that first night you opened up about Henderson. Maybe longer. Lena studied his face, searching. Finally, she smiled. Genuine, unguarded, beautiful. Then let's see where this leads. The Monday morning after their confession brought new awareness to the office. Jake found himself hyper-conscious of Elena's presence, forcing professional neutrality. While feeling the electricity of their shared secret beneath every interaction, the quarterly projections need revision by Thursday, Elena said, placing files on his desk with careful distance. Can you handle the demographic analysis? Of course, Jake replied. Their fingers brushed briefly contact, lasting barely a second, but Jake saw Elena's breath catch almost imperceptibly. Their first official date happened by accident. Jake spotted Elena grocery shopping Saturday morning, studying wine labels with lawyer-like intensity. She wore jeans and a soft sweater, looking younger than her office persona ever allowed. Fancy meeting you here, Jake said. Elena's face lit up. I was trying to decide between these for dinner tonight. I'm attempting coq au vin, though it'll probably be takeout Chinese. I make decent coq au vin. Family recipe from my French grandmother. Would you ... if you're not busy tonight? I'd love to help. Cooking together created intimacy that felt both natural and revolutionary. Jake guided Elena through the recipe while she chopped vegetables with precision, their conversation flowing. Between technique and personal stories, he said I was hopeless in the kitchen, Elena confessed, watching Jake brown the chicken, along with several other domestic failings that made me unsuitable as a wife. He sounds like an ass. Elena laughed at his bluntness. He wasn't entirely wrong. I worked 80-hour weeks, put career above everything. It doesn't make you unsuitable for marriage. It makes you ambitious. Tell that to David. He wanted someone who would make his career advancement a priority over her own. Jake turned to face her. You know, that's not what partnership is supposed to look like, right? Something vulnerable flickered across Elena's features, honestly. I'm not sure I know what healthy partnership looks like anymore. Jake moved closer, covering her hand with his. Then maybe we can figure it out together. Their relationship developed in stolen moments and careful choreography. Thursday evenings became regular dinner dates at Elena's condo. Meant coffee and conversation that stretched into afternoon, Lena sharing her writing while Jake worked on coding projects. The secrecy was thrilling and exhausting. At work, they maintained scrupulous professionalism, no lingering glances. No private jokes. Elena avoided showing Jake favoritism, sometimes assigning him to other senior associates to prevent impropriety. When Marcus mentioned Jake seemed happier lately, panic spiked through him. New workout routine. Jake lied, hating the deception. Whatever. It is. Keep it up. You've got this glow lately. Elena faced her own struggles. During partners' meetings where Jake's work was praised, she fought the urge to beam with pride. When Richard Morrison suggested Jake might be ready for increased responsibilities, she carefully modulated her enthusiasm.
Morrison's got good instincts,
She said neutrally, while glowing internally. The ethical implications kept her awake some nights. Was she compromising professional integrity? Were her feelings clouding judgment about his work quality? But watching Jake present his quarterly analysis with growing confidence, Lena saw not just her boyfriend, but a genuinely talented analyst, whose potential she'd recognized before their romance began. Close calls became more frequent. One evening, leaving the office building separately, but heading toward the same garage, Elena's assistant, Sarah, appeared unexpectedly. Lena, the Henderson files are ready for review. Lena froze, aware Jake was 20 feet away, clearly waiting. I'll review. The Monday. After Sarah left, they maintained distance until certain they weren't observed. We need to be more careful, Elena said later, pacing her living room. Jake caught her hand. I don't want to spend our entire relationship looking over our shoulders. Are you saying, I'm saying what we have is worth the risk? Yes, we need discretion, but I won't let fear prevent us from building something real. Elena studied his determined face. You're braver than I am, just sure about us in a way I've never been sure about anything. His conviction made her chest tighten. These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. You've made me remember who I used to be before I became so focused on achievement that I forgot about connection. Jake framed her face with his hands. Then we make this work. Carefully, discreetly, but we make it work. Alina leaned into his touch. Okay, we make it work.